Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson. We're back with our politics panel. Peggy Noonan of the Wall Street Journal, Michael Gerson from the Washington Post, Jeffrey Goldberg of the Atlantic, and Slate's Jamelle Bouie. Peggy, I want to start with you. Tough election. Country is split. There are more people voted for Hillary Clinton than Donald Trump, but he's the president. What does Donald Trump do to address that situation?
Oh, it's probably always good to start out with a central yet banal yet truthful insight like a kind word turneth away wrath. Ratchet it down, be cool, be humble, be calm. I think that a lot of people will be looking at the staff members and appointees he makes over the next few weeks and trying to discern whether we see accomplished people who look like they can do this and seem inherently moderate, or are folks I know, or if it'll be a little more unusual than that. One of the things I think that we'll see over the next 6 months, say, is that it's a mistake to discount the amount of pent-up energy there is in Capitol Hill on the Republican side. They've got a House, they've got a Senate. They haven't been able to do very much the past 8 years. They haven't been able to move too many balls forward. I think there will be a lot of reason for a lot of people on the Hill to want to work happily and closely with Donald Trump and do big things such as Newt Gingrich was talking about infrastructure, as everybody is. Well, heck, do a big pow on that. Yeah. Take a serious look at taxes. Do something big.
Michael, is doing something big going to solve the aftermath of this, in which you not only have Democrats who are unhappy, but there are a number of Republicans who were against Donald Trump who are now nervous and not sure?
Well, the party is unified right now, but there is a split here. Some of the Trump coalition hates the Republican establishment, and some of the coalition is the Republican establishment. That's the way you have to run a government. So it's all sweetness and light until you start to pick personnel and start to make priority decisions on governing. Some of that might be controversial things on executive orders, for example, with the Dreamers, and we're going to have a Supreme Court fight almost immediately. I think it's fine now. Republicans are unified by victory and the prospect of 6,000 jobs, which is what the president, fills. But I think we're going to see the fissures very soon in the choice of the chief of staff. That's going to send the signal, are they for conciliation or are they, with their base?
Jamelle, on the one hand, you have the president and Hillary Clinton and even Bernie Sanders saying, we'll try and work with the new president. On the other hand, you have people marching in the street. Where does that go from here?
I think this gets to the question of what President-elect Trump can do to unify the country in the wake of this election. I think the people marching in LA and college campuses around the country aren't marching simply because Trump was a Republican president who got elected. They're marching because the Trump campaign was very much centered on demagogic rhetoric against immigrants, against Muslim Americans, against black protesters, against sort of America's non-white community. And in the wake of Trump's election, there have been reports across the country of intimidation, harassment, and violence against those very groups. So if Trump is serious about unifying the country, if this is a thing he wants to do, then I think he needs to immediately speak against these acts of intimidation, harassment, and violence that are happening to some degree in the name of the campaign that he ran.
Jeffrey, what's your take on that? I mean, Newt Gingrich said those charges are garbage, they're baloney. On the other hand, there is this feeling in the country. Donald Trump is now the president of the entire country. And if he were to speak to that, as Jamelle suggests, what would that even look like?
Well, I mean, to unify what Peggy's saying and what Jamelle's saying, I think, is that if there's a moment for him to speak to the country broadly as president-elect, not as former reality TV star, it might be on this very question. He might do something large-hearted and articulate in a very specific way, I don't stand with the alt-right. I don't stand with racism. I reject the support of anybody affiliated with the KKK because I believe I want to be the president of all Americans. That would be the key signal to send that would actually calm the legitimate fears of a lot of people in America, citizens and people who are not yet citizens, and certainly undocumented people, that this is a fundamentally different kind of presidency than anything we've seen before. That would be the move.
That would
And I
be
think this would
really,
get to-
really good.
Yeah, and Republicans have been waiting for that pivot for a year and a half.
Right.
It's
Right.
very hard to escape the practice or habits of a lifetime. And he has not been able to do so this
The
far.
good thing is that he's shocked now that he's president of the United
Yeah, I
States.
agree with
And
that.
that hour and a half he spent with President Obama was a fairly shocking hour and a half for him, I'm sure, on any number of levels. And maybe the pivot will come because he realizes that I'm not a reality TV
The
star
extras
anymore.
are-
I have this job now.
And I think the
There are
personnel decisions will
legitimate-
get to some of this, right? So two of the people in contention for chief of staff are Stephen Bannon and Reince Priebus, the chairman of the RNC. And I think if Trump chooses Stephen Bannon, who is known for his associations with the website Breitbart, which is sort of a clearinghouse for these sort of alt-right groups, that'll give us a sign of the kind of president Donald Trump intends to be, and the extent to which he is not aiming for any kind of unity with America's non-white population.
Knock down the alt-right, show compassion and leadership towards those who are understandably nervous or even paranoid, but also deal with the fact that some people on the other side of Trump, some Democrats, some left, liberal, progressives, some have become quite unhinged. I was in the middle of an anti-Trump demonstration in Manhattan yesterday, and it managed somehow to be smilingly enraged. They were having a good time, but they were enraged at the outcome of this election. Sometimes people have to be reminded, this is what democracy is. There are outcomes sometimes that you don't like. And you can't simply assume the worst. At a certain point, you have to say, America, you made a decision. Okay, we're going to watch now, and soon we will be judging.
But it's hard when the worst people in the country are cheering. The people with the Confederate flags, the people that do anti-Semitism on Twitter. That's difficult for a lot of people in this country. But I do think an inaugural, for example, is almost always an act of national healing. If they just go back and look at previous inaugurals, back to Thomas Jefferson, healing divides. I mean, that is a moment where your goal is to bring together the country in a substantive way to say that we're united by values and more that are, stronger than the things that divide us. That could be a moment.
I think
He may have to move sooner than that, though.
And
That's January.
And I think part of the problem here is that Trump's campaign wasn't a typical lowercase d campaign of democracy. It was in a lot of ways an illiberal democracy campaign, a campaign that set out sort of explicitly that some people in this country aren't quite worth as more as other people in this country. And that is the core of the fear, that is the core of the paranoia, if you want to call it that. That is what people are worried about, and that is what needs to be resolved.
We have to remember also of 60 million people roughly who voted for Donald Trump. So many of them, they are just good, honest, decent, patriotic, wanting the best. They had an insight into our system that it was broken and it needed something dramatic. They just backed something dramatic, and they hope it'll work. But I understand the negativity that we have all seen, but there's profound decency too, but it's not marching in the streets. Forgive me.
I wouldn't deny what you just said about most of the people who voted for Trump. I would also say that to vote for Trump was to at least overlook the fact that we're talking about someone with a record of misogyny and racist invective. And so that is what is troubling to a lot of people, and that's what makes this election, among other things, makes this election very different than others, is that those good, decent people at least overlooked a very, very sorry record of prejudice.
Let's switch to the Democratic Party and its challenges here in the last couple of minutes. Jamelle, what does the Democratic Party learn from this election, and what does it do to fix itself?
I think on a tactical level, what the Democratic Party has learned is that it actually needs to win over some chunk or a greater chunk of working class whites. I mean, that ultimately is where this turned. Had Hillary Clinton won 60,000 more votes between Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin, she would be president of the United States. The question is how you go about that. I think the likely choice of Keith Ellison as head of the DNC, Keith Ellison, congressman from Minnesota, African-American, Muslim-American, but also a member of the Democratic Farmer Labor Party in Minnesota, a strong populist, is giving you a sense of where the party may go in this direction, kind of a commitment to its multiculturalism, a commitment to its social inclusion, but also a greater commitment to a kind of economic populism that might be able to reach these voters.
Michael, what's your take on, do they become the party of opposition? I remember Mitch McConnell saying that, keeping Barack Obama to be a one-term president was his goal. Is that the better organizing principle? Or have the Democrats really lost the theme and need to sell something positive.
Well, they don't have a lot of levers, and they do need to wait for mistakes and wait for overreach, which often happens in new administrations. So I think they need to do this. But they do have a choice. They have a Sanders model, a kind of left-wing economic populism. They have a Biden model, which is a much more outreach to white Catholics and union workers and a more traditional Democratic constituency. Or they have just someone who can actually implement the Obama model, the Obama coalition, which Hillary Clinton tried and could not get out the votes to do. But another candidate might be able to. This is the coalition of the ascendant. They're not yet ascendant. They will eventually be ascendant. I don't think that model is a discredited model.
I just think it's amazing that 1 year ago and 18 months ago, the subject at this table was the breakup of the Republican Party. It is shattering. It is breaking into. It's lost everything.
Also, last week, it was the discussion.
Fair enough.
Yeah, not just
And
a year
now
and a half ago.
it has turned, and we're talking about the breakup of the Democratic Party. There's no deep bench. They can't win here. They can't do this. They've lost here. The Obama coalition didn't turn out. White working class doesn't like them. This is an amazing flip on expectations.
Although the Sanders campaign was evidence of
well,
all
yes,
of that.
and part
It's
of
just-
the whole, yes, but they didn't go down that road.
Unfortunately, we have to go at this point, but fortunately we've got lots to talk about in future weeks, and we'll look forward to having all of you here for that. But for the moment, we got to go. We'll be right back in a moment.